everyone. Welcome to The Craft and Business of Books with me, Tetyana Denford.
And I'm Marissa.
This is the show that discusses the tools, the tricks, the stumbling blocks to the writing process, but also the rarely seen perspective from the industry side and everything in between. We are live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern, so please click to subscribe to be alerted before every episode. And also, during the show, please feel free to leave comments, suggestions, and we will try and cover them during the episode, but if not, we'll cover them in a subsequent episode. So we're basically just here to give you the information that you need to try and get your book on a shelf, but make it a lot less scary than you think. Okay, so what are we doing today?
So today we're going to discuss query letters, and specifically, so the letters that you send to an agent when you're, pitching your work. So in hopes that they'll represent you. Query letters are a bit scary, I think, because you're asking someone to give you a job interview. Essentially, you want your book published, so they need to see your best self. So today we are going to start from the writer's perspective of why an agent needs a query letter. So Tetyana, can you tell us about how you went about researching and writing query letters to approach agents? Because I think that the genuine responses you received is testament to the smart work that you did at the outset of this.
Well, yeah, tough. Query letters are tough. I think it was the hardest part in my writing process, pretty much. I mean, I tried to go the traditional route. And before I even thought about reaching out to an agent, first of all, you have to finish your manuscript. You have to polish it up as much as you can. I mean, it feels like an impossible task, but you have to go through so many drafts. And then when you feel like you've squeezed out every single thing that you can do in the manuscript, then you have to be confident that it's done. And then if you're confident that you want to go the route of an agent, you have to start researching. Okay, so I mean, it's creating, I love a spreadsheet. So it's creating a spreadsheet with names, locations, what they require in a query, because some agents want a query letter plus the first 3 chapters. Some agents only want a query letter, so just an email with a paragraph about your book, and then who you are and why this story is compelling. You are pitching them. You have to do the work. And I mean, I used the Writers and Artists Yearbook, and I'll put it up right here. It's really handy because it lists in your genre that you're writing in, it lists everyone that you would want to contact. And I think, I think every writer, when they go through this process, says that it takes a while if you're going to do it right. For me, it took about 2.5 months because not only do you have to make a kind of a tier, so who you're going to reach out to first. You do 5 agents at a time, right? So then you do the first 5 and then see the response. And then you do the next 5 and see a response. And then it's a long-winded process. It can't be, from my experience, I don't think it should be a mass email. So, and I think even though in the end I decided to self-publish this book, I got an amazing response. I was very lucky about that. I mean, the first 10 query letters I sent out, 6 requested my full manuscript, which is really, really difficult to do. And it's not just luck and timing. A lot of it has to do with preparation. So I talked a lot about that, but it's it has to be specific, right? It has to be, you are pitching them your work. You want to be seen. So I don't know. I mean, from the industry, from your experience, what experience have you had with query letters? How have you seen them?
So, I mean, we're certainly in the roles that I've had in publishing, 2 steps removed from query letters, right? Because you're going to get to the point where you're sending that to an agent. You and your agent are going to work on a submission together that then goes to publishers, right? Maybe at that point I would see it on some books that were, required some kind of input, from a digital marketing standpoint or a digital product standpoint, I would see it. But in most cases, it would be even after that, once a book was already acquired. Right. So, however, I think the thing that is interesting is that a lot of what you initially put in your query letter, the copy that you write, it being compelling, that carries through. And that tends to be, there tends to be some version of that still shows up when an editor is launching the title to the rest of the company, right?
Oh, and I didn't know that.
I think is kind of interesting. It's, if you write that well, that can really, really stay with you for a while. The thing that I think it's important to know from my perspective is that, when it comes to receiving a pitch or a query, publisher or agent alike, what they're going to do first is do their due diligence on you as a writer, and just, try to find out who you are and what you're about. And they're going to start in the same place that you would if you were going, on a Tinder date. They're going to Google you. So what I can say is that it's important that you have all your ducks in a row before you even get to the, sending your query letters out, so that the second that agent receives your letter and they Google your name, there is stuff there for them to find and to sink their teeth into, if they are interested in you. So have a website, which can be totally free. Have a Facebook page, if you're on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, and have a voice there, make sure that it is clear and it's polished. To make sure that your images aren't grainy or pixely, and that you're branding yourself to whatever degree is possible for you. And this goes beyond, online, because if there are seeds that you can plant beforehand, like getting articles published, or media placement, or speaking at events, participating in events, take that time to set the stage before you even do that. Because
marketing yourself and networking. Also, do you know what I thought? I thought of another thing. Your email address. Mm-hmm. It has to be professional.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know it sounds like a small thing, but I was thinking the other day, what if an agent got a submission from somebody like, loves to party? Mm-hmm. Something, it makes you have to make a certain kind of impression, I think. So I imagine that somebody sees that you're serious about your work.
Sure, absolutely. Of course. I think you need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, everything that you're sending out to people and everything someone is going to see. And if something doesn't strike quite the right note, then you need to go, I got to change this. And and you have to get it right. Just have your email address be your name or some version of your name, best you can.
Yeah. What if you don't? But then there's the alternative. Because look at somebody like Delia Owens, mm-hmm. who is amazing. She's had so much success, and it's so wonderful. Mm-hmm. She was living in the middle of nowhere, sure. Which is great. She was doing her own thing, submitted a manuscript. She did not have a profile necessarily on social media. What if you don't have that? Does that make a difference?
Certainly, I think there's so much more to say about online presence, and I think that we should absolutely save for a later episode, because that is my area of expertise, really. I think the main piece of advice is to make sure that agents and publishers are not met with a void, when they first find out about you, because I think that the risk you run if you are not online at all is sending a message to agents and publishers that you are not modern thinking. And again, there are always the exceptions, of course, to the rule, but certainly for any publisher or agent looking to take someone on, an established audience is a plus. That said, I think it can be a huge mistake, and it is a huge mistake I've seen agents and publishers make, which is thinking that a follower number is the be all end all, and that absolutely.
Yes, I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
I think, I would encourage publishers, agents, and authors, not to be taken in by that, because unless you are really digging into engagement and metrics at that point in the process, which is not likely that you will be, that can be totally inflated, and it can give a false sense of success to all parties involved. So, I once sat in a launch meeting where an editor excitedly presented this new author that they had acquired, who had tens of thousands of followers on Facebook and Twitter. And, you could see everyone's eyes light up and everyone was really excited. Like this book was a sure thing. Meanwhile, my eyes are widening and my brain is pedaling a mile a minute because I had previously done some freelance work for this author. And I knew that the followers were fake. I'd seen them coming in at the time. I knew that they were purchased. I knew they were not real. And I knew that those not real people were never going to be able to physically buy a book because they weren't real. And obviously no one knew that. But it didn't do any favors to anyone. Yeah. The publisher didn't get what they thought they were getting. Sales were not what they initially projected, and I'd be shocked to find that the author earned out their advance, and I know they didn't get another deal. So, it doesn't help anyone if it's phony, as long as everything you're putting out there is genuine.
That's the thing. And I think that's what ultimately comes down to when it comes to a presence, when it comes to query letters, the thing that they're looking for, and I know it's a word that's so overused, but it's authenticity. Mm-hmm. It's, if you are honest with the path that you want to take and the career that you want and that you're proud of your writing, it will show, surely. Otherwise, if you try and fake it, everybody can see through it. Yeah. So, if you can summarize from your side what you think the most compelling thing is about query letters, and we can talk about this with our guests later. But
sure. I think what you said, authenticity and showing that you've put in the effort and you know who they are and it's not generic, I think is the the most important thing, being committed to your work and it showing that you've done hard work.
Yeah.
So
I think for me, from the writing perspective, I think the most important thing is that you do your work before you even bother approaching an agent, because what you don't want to do is waste their time.
Sure.
They have a job to do. And if you're going to make something really compelling, and it's kind of your only chance,
mm-hmm.
that's the thing that people don't really realize, is that if you do it halfway, they're not likely, maybe, I don't know, but they're probably not likely if you query them again, they might go, oh yeah, is that person?
Sure.
And I think, and you don't have to make it fantastical. You don't have to, I read a story once where, I went to a masterclass with an agent and he was telling a story where he received somebody's manuscript, with an oven glove attached to it. And the message was, this manuscript will be too hot to handle.
Oh.
And he was like, you don't have to do that, because and he said, I guarantee that manuscript is rubbish. And it's terrible, because you can imagine somebody really putting their heart into something, and then they do something like that, and it just really ruins your chances. You just have to be yourself, I think. That's from my perspective.
Yes.
So good. Okay.
Yeah.
We've covered that. We're going to actually have a special guest on after our next segment, so we can ask more questions about that. So if anybody's watching, please feel free to submit some questions and we'll try and answer them.
Yeah.
But right now, we're going to do what makes this book great.
So, what do James Joyce, Dr. Seuss, John Grisham, and Catherine Stockett all have in common? They all had their books rejected many times over. And the same is true for the book and ensuing series we'll be talking about today, which is Jack Canfield's Chicken Soup for the Soul series. The Chicken Soup for the Soul series includes over 250 titles, and according to published statistics, has sold more than 110 million copies in the US and Canada alone, more than 500 million copies worldwide, been translated into 43 languages, and published in over 100 countries. They continue to actively engage in trademark licensing with brand extensions, including print media, radio programs, puzzle books, pet food, home decor, and of course, drumroll, chicken soup.
Oh my God.
Tetyana, as a writer, tell us what makes this book great.
Oh, nostalgia.
Yeah.
Nostalgia. And I think it's because, I'm not the only one, but people will see that, a lot of Americans mostly, but globally, I think people will see that front cover and then remember first seeing it when they were younger. I mean, I first saw the original in high school. Now that's dating me, so I'm a bit uncomfortable about that. But at first I thought, oh God, it's such a cheesy collection of stories. It's very Reader's Digest. No offense to anybody who loves Reader's Digest, you know, but it's just, I don't know. After I started reading it, I thought, what a unique thing to kind of connect everybody together with human stories. And that, I think, from a writer's perspective, it just kind of, it made everybody a little bit more real. Famous people, musicians, artists, they're sharing stories, and just regular people too. It's like everybody's connected. It's a level playing field. And I think that was what was really unique about that. And I think that's probably why it was such a phenomenon from that perspective. It's so emotive, you know. I mean, yeah, I think I was quite struck by it. But also now, looking back, I think, if I can do this, I think it's comparable to something like A Humans of New York.
Sure.
Because Humans of New York is brilliant, and it stitches together stories of people in the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
This, in the 90s, was the first of its kind, you know? I don't know. What do you think? Did you like it?
Insane, you know, as a teenager in the 90s, I mean, these books were everything. So, you know, last week we talked about connection, and this book is absolutely one of those examples of being able to connect with lots of people through the varied short stories, right? Because they were all so different. And, you know, and they offered comfort through them. Right? I don't recall any of them ending badly, right? They were all like uplifting and
exactly.
Spirit, right? And I think your parallel to Humans of New York is great and absolutely illustrates what the book did well, you know, which was sharing personal stories that, you know, the kinds of stories that didn't have, where else did that stuff have a home in those days? You know, nowhere. There was, you know, no Facebook, you know, no Instagram.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, you know, this book was great because the series is so incredibly well executed after its initial success. You know, the branding was on point for the time. I think about that iconic script and the coloring. You know, I can still vividly recall all those regal, like purples and oranges on my copy of the College Soul edition, which I got while I was still in high school, because obviously. You know, and then, you know, with the image down the left side of the spine. And, you know, that was steadily carried through all the books in the series, which is still a very common thing that publishers do, right? To give readers a visual cue. This is something they might like because of familiarity. And, you know, even the title, it evokes the ultimate comfort food, right? It was, you know, chicken soup.
And that's actually, Jack Canfield did an interview, and he said one of the things that he wanted to do was tell stories and kind of share people's stories. So that in itself is really authentic. But also he said that they couldn't find a title. And he got the idea from, I think, his grandmother saying, well, when I wanted to make you feel better, I gave you chicken soup. And he's like, well, hang on a minute. You know, it makes sense.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like, it's just something that is so evocative, and you just know immediately, right? You see that title and you know exactly what you're getting. And that's huge for marketing and branding. And that's, you know, I think part of why it's been so successful. The other thing is that it was something you could confidently gift to anyone, because there were so many different editions of it. And they, you know, there was really something for everyone in all of them, you know, and everyone wants to be comforted, right? So, I mean, who knew that the least of our worries at that time was the 90s? You know, I want to know, where is chicken soup for the COVID soul, Jack? When's that coming? Who's publishing?
Business idea,
right? Right.
Yeah. But I'd love to ask whoever, anybody's watching, or even after the episode airs, I'd love for people to leave comments about whether they loved it, whether they didn't really rate it, you know, I mean, if they gifted it to people. I think it's right now we're kind of leaning towards nostalgia anyway. So I think this is a great book to kind of revisit.
Yeah, I would love to hear people sort of like serious memories of this book, because I know I shared one with you personally that I'm not going to share here because it's just not happening. But like one of the high school boyfriend, he was in college. One of my most like vivid memories as a young person, you know, involves this Chicken Soup for the College Soul book.
I know, it's so good. So that's the segment for this book. Again, feel free to reach out. Now, what we're going to do next is have a special guest, which I'm really excited about because it's a perspective that you don't really get. It's direct from an agent, and we're going to ask about query letters. So let's bring her on.
Hi.
Oh, hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for.
Of course, it's so exciting.
So this is our first guest, Jemima Forrester, who is a literary agent with David Higham in the UK. I first met Jemima when she was a commissioning editor at Orion when we worked together on commercial fiction and crime and thriller writers like Denise Mina and Steve Kavanaugh and Mason Cross. She made the transition to becoming an agent, aka the dark side, right, in 2016, and now represents authors like Josie Silver. So we're going to ask her some questions about her initial interactions with hopeful writers today. So we'll start with, what makes a query letter really stand out to you, particularly for fiction?
Yeah, this is I think that's so important. You were saying about the query letter. I mean, you've spent months or probably more likely years on your book, and you need to give it the best possible chance to find the right agent. And I thought all your advice about doing your research into the agent and approaching people in tiers was the correct way to go. For me, I mean, I received probably 6 or 7 submissions a day from writers who are looking for agents. And that's on top of looking after my existing authors. And as you can imagine, you don't get very long as an agent to make a decision. So everything counts, and your cover letter, your query letter is the most important thing, because it's the thing I'll look at first, and I'll decide based on your query letter whether I'm going to read that right now or whether I'm going to put it on my to read pile, which I do get to, but it could take a couple of months to get to that pile. Whereas if I see something in your query letter that really stands out, I'll read that straight away. For me, I think the most important thing about a query letter is your pitch, and refining your pitch. It's really hard. It's something that we in the publishing industry spend a huge amount of time on, and we get to practice it all the time, and you as authors don't. And I think that anything you can do, like going into and looking in bookshops and seeing the way that books in the area that you're writing in are pitched, the kind of one-line pitch. I think it's actually a really good exercise while you're writing as well, is to think about how you dilute everything in your book down to one line. What's the hook? What's the thing that's going to make me pick your book up over somebody else's? And often, it can be looking at the themes, like, is it love? Is it loneliness? Is it motherhood? Is it loss? Like, what are the themes, the universal themes? Whether you're writing women's fiction or crime or magical realism, like, there are going to be themes in there that are going to speak to everybody. So I guess picking out those. I also find I hear a lot of agents say this, that comparison titles, and finding a way to tell me what kind of book it is, and also if it's the kind of book that I like. I find comparisons so useful, and they can be books that have been doing well in the kind of area that you're writing in, but also they can be TV shows. I've just sold the book of an author that I took on at the end of last year, and her query letter had that her book was Wild meets Sliding Doors, and I was like, yes, inject it into my veins. Yeah. It was such a great, and I just saw that line. I was like, I'm sold. I'm sold. That I'm going to read this one straight away, and it was brilliant. And it was kind of speculative, and it was really clever. So yeah, I think if you can do it, something meets something, if it doesn't fit neatly in a box. But yeah, I think using your one-line pitch and your comparison title is so important. And yeah, and in the query letter, I expect to see a kind of blurb, like the back cover of a book. So again, going into bookshops and reading the back covers of books in the area that you're writing in is so helpful. Such good research. And start, when I write, and I have to write a lot of copy, because when I take on your book, I'm then pitching to publishers, and they're then, as you were saying, it kind of trickles down. Yeah. And if you get it right the first time, you'll see bits of the thing of your query letter to an agent on the back cover of your book. Yeah. But I have to think a lot about that. And if I try and write copy, I write 10 versions of it. So, don't rush it. Don't think, oh, I'm going to write this and send it today. because it's going to take you a little while to get that blurb and that one-line pitch really refined and work out what it is about your book that's going to make you pick it up.
Yeah. I mean, if, you know, the way you pitch is important for fiction or nonfiction, but I'm going to ask specifically for nonfiction. What kind of presence are you looking for somebody for nonfiction? Because when they submit a book, it's slightly, obviously with fiction, you just kind of have to present this in one page basically and then add your chapters. But for nonfiction, there's a proposal. So what kind of, you know, environment do you need to see outside of the author to kind of be interested in them in that?
I think that, I mean, nonfiction is really wide. I work mostly in commercial nonfiction, but nonfiction is huge. You've got everything from like serious history to cookery to lifestyle, humor, you know, celebrity autobiography. Nonfiction is a massive area, and I think presence, if we're talking about kind of social media presence and platform, I guess we talk about a lot, especially in nonfiction. It kind of depends on the sort of book. Like if you're writing in cookery or lifestyle, it's becoming more and more important to have a platform. You know, the books that are getting deals have, you know, the authors have huge Instagram followers.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if what you're writing in nonfiction is, if you've got a smart, unique idea and you're the right person to write this book, it might be your life experience. You know, if it's something that's kind of memoir or you know, yeah, anything, you know, if it's anything academic and you have that background, and in that case, it's going to be less important about your kind of social media profile and more about who you are as a person and why you're the right person to write that book. And I think that's much more, you know, who you are as a person and your background is much more important in nonfiction. So
yeah,
presenting that as in your query letter is very important.
Cool.
So basically, if you can get yourself a television show.
If you can get yourself a television show and, you know, 150,000 Instagram followers, you're probably going to get a book deal.
Just do that first.
And they're not always successful. They're not always successful. People with 150,000 Instagram followers. So at the end of the day, it's a mixture. And again, you know, if you have courage and conviction in your idea and it's unique enough and you've got a good angle and you're the right person to tell this, you know, to write this book, then don't worry too much about platform because. Yeah. You know, in some cases, it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah.
But I wonder if specifically for nonfiction, if you can have a really clever idea and lots of Instagram followers and you could get a TV show, but if you don't actually have the presence to carry all of that off, I think that's also part of what people don't understand. I think when you're an author, even fiction, you just have to kind of embody what you do, I think probably, you know?
I think that's true more and more, you know, as readers get a connection to writers through social media. I mean, always there's been, you know, book events, but now more than ever, readers feel like they want to connect with the author of the book directly. So yeah, I mean, publishers are relying more and more on the authors to promote their book, to market their book. And you know, I never say to authors, I mean, as I said, maybe if it's cookery or lifestyle nonfiction, but certainly in the terms of fiction and in some areas of nonfiction, I would never say, you know, you have to have an Instagram account, you have to have Twitter, whatever. But yeah, increasingly that is becoming quite useful for publishers as readers connect more directly with authors.
Yeah. Sorry, we veered off to tangent. Marissa, go.
You're saying the things that we've said 100 times, both of us. You know, which is I would never recommend anyone, you know, choose to have a presence on a social media platform that they didn't feel comfortable in because it will show. So, you know, you've got to pick what works for you and where you can really find an audience and really connect with people because that's what everyone's looking for, right? So, yes, you're absolutely right, and that makes me happy to hear it. So. Next question would be, what would you see in a query letter that would make you say, absolutely no way, just.
I mean, the thing is, I mean, every agent is looking for something different. So just because I say absolutely no way doesn't mean it's a no way from everybody. I think things to avoid are probably not giving anything. So I've had query letters that like, dear Ms. Forrester, here is my book. Thanks. And I'm like, this is not giving me anything. I'm a busy lady. I want you to pitch your book to me. Like, if you can't even bother to do that, it doesn't make me necessarily want to pick your book up next.
Yeah.
And I think things that haven't, I mean, I would definitely say one of the best pieces of advice is direct it to a specific agent. At my agency, for example, there are 8 different agents. We're all looking for different things. If you write it to Dear Sir/Madam, or even worse, Dear Sirs, it will just end up with the wrong agent. Probably they all get read, but it's not guaranteed that it's going to, you know, I'm looking for commercial fiction. If your commercial novel goes to my colleague who's looking for literary fiction, it's going to get rejected. So personalize it. You can be a bit, you know, I like it when people say, I've picked, you know, I saw you did this, you know, YouTube video and you said you were looking for XYZ, or I saw on Twitter you were tweeting about little fires everywhere or whatever, and I thought you'd love my book. And I feel like that really helps, rather than just, you know, I feel like you've just copy and pasted a different name in the Dear section. Yeah, I don't think, you know, publishing is agents are looking for different things. So don't think that just because you get a no, it's the end of the road. And also the thing I have to tell authors all the time is that when we open our submission letters, we're looking to find our next author. We want to find them. We're not open thinking, oh, what a pain, I can't wait to reject this. Like, we go in with an open mind. So you've got us, you've got a willing audience. You just need to sell your book the best way you possibly can.
Yeah, good point. I mean, and actually, as the bookend to that, the last question I will have, which is, what is the best or favorite query you received in recent memory?
Ooh, I get great queries all the time, and I've taken on a few authors recently. Do you know what? I'll tell you this is an interesting one because it's quite unusual, but it kind of ties into what we were discussing earlier. I took on an author at the beginning of lockdown because she tweeted an idea for a book. She said, imagine a couple have a one-night stand and then they wake up and the country's gone into lockdown and they're stuck together for 14 days. So they have to self-isolate for 14 days.
Oh, great.
And I thought it was so clever. And I just messaged her on Twitter and I said, she's a writer, she's a journalist. So I was a fan of her writing already. And I said, I think you should turn this into a book. And it went from there. So that was a really unusual one. But like I said, in terms of a classic query letter, I really loved that Wild Meat Sliding Doors. It was a really original, really clever, and I'm such a Cheryl Strayed fan, as Marissa knows. Yeah. So it really appealed to me.
Oh, that's great.
That's great.
We're going to have to end the segment, but I just wanted to say thank you so much, Jemima. This is just wonderful information for from the writer's perspective. Honestly, it's so helpful, and I'm really grateful for that.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Jemima, do you want to share how people might find out more information about you if they think you are the person?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm at David Higham Associates, so if you look that up, I'm on there, my smiling face. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. I'm a bit of a lurker on Twitter, but I do go there. I do go on there quite a lot to find out information. But I'm tweeting a bit less these days. I found it quite time consuming.
Yeah.
You can get a bit obsessed with Twitter, can't you? But yeah, I'm on all social media, apart from TikTok. I'm a bit old for TikTok, I'm afraid.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
We're not 13. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, that was really lovely.
She is very lovely.
And I think honestly, to have that perspective is just so valuable. I mean, there are so many writers out there that would love to have that from someone. So I think just being able to do that was great. I'm so glad we had her. Great. Right, so that's it for us for this episode. So please remember to tune in live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Please remember to leave comments and questions either during the show or after. You can watch this series at any point. And yeah, it's been great having you all.
See you next week.
Bye.